do we mean? What is Our Lady of Fatima? What is this particular event, this apparition to these children, if you will? What actually went down here, as we're pretty much doing an intro to Fatima here?
Fatima is a little town in Portugal. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours north and maybe a little east of Lisbon. So if you land at the Lisbon airport, it's about an hour and a half, 2 hour car ride up there to Fatima. I usually take a bus if and when I do get to go. And it was very much it was just a mountain town in there in Portugal. And then between May and October of 1917, Our Lady appeared in this little place called the Cova de Ira, and to 3 children. These apparitions were preceded by the Angel of Portugal, otherwise known as the Angel of Peace, sometime between 1915 and 1916. We're not too sure of the dates, but it was roughly around in through there. And then Our Lady appeared in that time frame specified in 1917. And of course, apparitions are a big draw, a big attention getter, even in those days before social media. And as people heard about it, more and more people were coming each month, usually on the 13th. There was one point where in August where that wasn't able to happen because the local administrator kidnapped the children. So they were not able to keep the specified date with Our Lady there. But she appeared to them a few days later in a place called Valinhos, or Aljusto. I can't remember now. As either Aljusto or Valinhos, there's a spot commemorating where the place took place now, where the event took place now. But and in July, I think Our Lady had promised that there would be a sign that everybody would see. Or most people would see, that would make people believe that what the children were saying was true. Then they were kidnapped in August. They got back a few days later at their home, and then October 13th came around, and it was downpouring that day, and the ground was soaked, people's clothes were soaked, and there was an estimated 70 to 100,000 people there to witness the claimed miracle. And it did take place. The clouds had parted, and the sun could be seen moving around the sky quite unnaturally. Some people called it the sun was dancing, or the dance of the sun. And then another one, it looked like it was coming closer and closer, like it was going to come crashing into the earth. People were screaming, confessing their sins out loud. I mean, it was quite the scene. And we do possess some pictures because cameramen were there. And there were some cameras that took pictures of people looking up at the sky during the miracle itself. I don't believe we have any photos of the sun itself during that time, but there's photos of people looking up at the miracle itself. Then the sun had set itself back in the sky, and when everything calmed down, people looked around and they saw that the clothes and the ground were bone dry, like there had been no rain at all. And there wasn't enough time that had passed for the rain to, for all the moisture to go away. It was a matter of minutes. So there's basically 2 parts then to the miracle: what the sun did and what happened with the water. There are 2 parts, and that's a very important aspect to focus on, because there's been a lot of studies about what exactly the miracle of the sun is or was. And what possibly could have happened to or taken place to allow it to happen. There's a gentleman over in Portugal. His name is Bernardo Amada. He's actually done some good work in this area, researching and pulling together what scientists have said, especially in Portuguese, over there in Portugal. So good work being done on the subject. But the one thing that no science can explain is how everything got dry. They could say, atmospheric conditions, made the sun appear. People could look at it without hurting their eyes. They could say all kinds of stuff. And admittedly, I mean, if anybody's ever spent some time outdoors, you get to see some pretty funky stuff in atmospheric weather. When weather's going on and skies are turning different colors, and people can certainly claim different things, but how do you explain what happened with the water? You know, uh, so I do tend to place great emphasis upon that when I'm speaking on Fatima. Then, after the apparitions had ended, the miracle had taken place, it still took the church about 13 years to investigate and to come to a conclusion, but it eventually did in October of 1930 when the local bishop, Don Jose Correa de Silva, had approved it officially. During that time, two of the visionaries, Francisco and Jacinta Marto, they were brother and sister, they got sick and died. Francisco died in April of 1919, I think it was, and Jacinta, his sister, died in February of 1920.
Mhm.
So that left their cousin, Lucia, the only surviving witness, and she lived in Fatima a little while longer, but then sometime in either 1920 or 1921, she was moved to, I think, Villar, where she was to begin her education. And one of the reasons why they wanted her to be educated was not only because Our Lady told her that she must learn to read, but also because the bishop had a desire. He didn't want her to follow the fate of some other visionaries over the centuries who just kind of fell by the wayside, but he wanted to protect her. So uh, they believed that her becoming educated was the best way to do that. So she did, and she was educated by a religious community called the Dorotheans, and she eventually entered them around 1925, give or take. During all of this time, she is learning to read, and she's able to start writing letters. People are asking her questions, church inquiries. She's responding to things, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Things are approved by 1930, but there were some further apparitions that occurred to Lucia during this time. One of them is kind of almost like it's very unknown. It's kind of it's really forgotten about. But when Our Lady had appeared in 1917, she said that she would appear there 6 times, but she also said, and I will appear here yet a 7th time. And that happened, that was fulfilled just before Lucia went off to be educated at the bishop's order. Uh, Lucia was basically saying goodbye to all of the places in Fatima. And when she went back to where the apparitions had happened in 1917, Our Lady had appeared again and had told her that, see, I told you I would come here yet a 7th time. And she confirmed that it was the will of God that Lucia follow the will of the bishop. And that's a very important point. Lucia obeying her religious superiors, having this confirmed by heaven. This is an important point because we'll see this come up again at a very notable point in Lucia's life later on. Then in 1925 and then 1929, there were further apparitions where in 1925, Lucia was told that she was to spread the devotion to the Immaculate Heart that she had learned about in 1917, more on that later. And then in 1929, Our Lady appeared with the Trinity and revealed that now is the time for a certain request that had been made, that had been foretold in 1917, would be requested, but was now finally manifesting there in 1929. So let me kind of back up and explain these events. In July of 1917, July 13th, Our Lady communicated a secret to the three children, and the secret was in 3 parts. The first part was a vision of hell. The second part was the revelation of the devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and then the third part, which remains a bit mysterious, but because it wasn't written down until later, the third part pertains to what would happen if Our Lady's requests were not heeded. So the first part, Vision of Hell, it was pretty straightforward. They saw demons and all kinds of, human souls. They were roiling around in hell, being tossed about by the flames. It was quite terrifying. And the children looked up at Our Lady, and she said, "You have seen how the souls of poor sinners go." To save them, God wishes to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. And then she proceeds to um, talk to them further about what all of this means. And there's kind of like two paths in the second part of the secret. The first path is if Our Lady's requests are heeded, XYZ would happen. But if her requests were not heeded, ABC would happen. Well, what did she request? She requested that the country of Russia be consecrated to the Immaculate Heart, and that there'd also be the communion, what she called the communion of reparation of the 5 first Saturdays. So that's part of the 5 first Saturday devotion. And if these requests were heeded, she said, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. Well, the children didn't know what was going on. They didn't get daily newspapers. I mean, they didn't even know how to read. But at that time, you had, was it Trotsky and Lenin? There was the forerunner of Lenin, and then there was Lenin who kind of followed up on the heels of that guy when the Russian Tsar was overthrown, and you had the establishment of communism or Bolshevism under Lenin being formally installed in Russia. Well, this was a big problem because communism was atheist, and once it had the power of the state backing it, it was going to spread a lot of errors throughout the world, and that's precisely how Our Lady framed it. She said that if Russia is not converted, she will spread her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions and famines, and good people will be martyred. The Holy Father will have much to suffer. Various nations will be annihilated. So she said all these terrible things would take place if Russia was not consecrated. And there's a big debate over what the word convert means.
Right.
Some people believe that it means that Russia would convert to Roman Catholicism. Well, I don't believe in that myself, but that is one interpretation.
Okay. So it could be conversion to Christianity? Could that be generally that in general, or what?
Russia was already Christian via Russian Orthodoxy. So, so that it was already a Christian nation.
Yeah.
And just because Bolshevism took over, communism, doesn't mean that suddenly every Russian citizen became communist overnight.
Right, of course. Yeah.
You have to. Archbishop Fulton Sheen makes a really good distinction. So you have to distinguish between Russia, the country, and the people that run it, or the people of Russia. You know, he says the two are not the same. And so Russia had to grind, once it had all of these terrible things happen, the atheism and communism take over, they had to beat it into the people to try to drive out faith, even if it was the Orthodox faith. They had to drive out Christian faith by very bad means. I mean, people still talk about the KGB in like legendary terms, you know, and Pravda with all of these tactics to warp people's brains. And I mean, it's just anybody who has lived under communism, and there are still many people alive who will tell you. I myself had a personal experience when I was doing my semester. I was educated at Franciscan University of Steubenville, and they have the semester abroad program in Gaming, Austria. And I was there in the spring of 2002. And in February, I was able to go to the Czech Republic. And there was a guy, a merchant, who had his wares outside of a store in an open area. I remember it was near a garnet shop because there was a garnet mine, like the gem garnet. There was a garnet mine nearby, and so garnets were a big thing there in the Czech Republic, in Prague. And so this guy had a T-shirt, and I asked him about what the saying was underneath because it was in Czech. And he translated it, but it was what he said afterwards that really slammed me. He said, and I remember his words, he said, yeah, now that we're no longer under the communists, we can have stuff like that. Those few words spoke volumes to me about the evils of communism. You know, Um, and that's just a part of that got passed to me, you know, because at that point, communism had only been gone officially since about the time of the Berlin Wall. So that would have been only 13 years prior. Now, of course, we got to add 13 and 21 is what now, what, 34, 33 years, something like that. So
Right,
it's a
right.
little bit longer now. But back then it was only 13 years, you know. And I'm getting to be an old man. I'm only 41. I'm getting to be an old man.
Hey, you're not the only one, brother. I mean, I'm no spring chicken either.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
hey, with age comes
Horses.
wisdom, right? I hope with age comes wisdom.
I hope so. I
Yeah.
really do hope
No,
so.
it truly does, because I'll tell you why. You are, in my estimation, there's nobody better when it comes to this topic than you. Your material, your knowledge in this particular topic is unparalleled. And I'm going to tell you right now that I'm going to do the best that I can to help promote your new book and any material you have out on this. I'm going to share it on all my social medias. I think that you're doing an incredible work here, because very rarely, from my experience, do you find a balanced presentation on Fatima. Very, very rarely. And I think you possess that balance, and your knowledge is second to none. I'm not just saying that because you're my guest. In fact, as people know, I am very, very, very particular with the guests I bring onto my show. Very particular. I only bring people on that I think are great in their field, and I think you are fantastic in this particular field. You're doing great, great work, brother. I just want to commend you on that, and I can't wait for that book to come out, because I'm going to get. Hopefully, it'll be out by Christmas, or maybe not. If it is, I know I'm going to be gifting that to a number of people.
I'm pretty sure the book will be out before Christmas.
Gotcha.
It just depends upon how fast the print copy that I ordered up gets here, and it should be here in the next couple of weeks. And then I have to get it off to the diocese, and the diocese has to send it out to the censor. The censor takes time to read it all, and then he, gives it back to the diocese, and the diocese lets me know. So it just depends upon how fast that process moves.
Right.
Yeah, so more on the book a little bit later, though.
Definitely.
But I thank you for your kind words. About me and Fatima. There are good people here in the United States. Like the World Apostolate of Fatima, the USA group there, like Bob Bernster, Dave Carollo. They're good people, and they are very focused on the message. Every so often, I have occasion to call and talk with them, and just kind of, shop talk Fatima.
Right.
So I mean, they're good people, and I think from what I saw on Facebook, actually, they were just interviewed by Doug Keck for EWTN's Bookmark, if I got that correctly.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah, because the recent news is that Sister Lucia is now Venerable Lucia. So the Pope.
Great news.
Yeah, so that was like big. Everything's flying around, and so I get the focus with the message. I totally understand, and as I go deeper and further in studying things, it's like, oh my goodness, wow, this is just our lady's message was just so profound,
Yeah.
And a lot of people focus upon the secret, kind of like what we were talking about a few minutes ago. A lot of people focus on the secret, and yes, that's an extremely important part of it. But there's so much more that we could focus upon,
Yeah.
A lot of my studies have focused upon the secret because there's been a lot of controversies and misunderstandings about what was said and how we should interpret it. And so a lot of my work has been to back it up, look at what the original sources say, and go accordingly.
Right.
Because I have an ability with foreign languages, I'm not fluent in any foreign language, but I know enough to be dangerous. And now we have so many tools at our disposal. And then I have friends within the the translating community. That if I can give stuff to, it just makes for a really good picture for things.
No doubt.
And I bring these things into English, and I say, well, no, actually, that's really not what was said. When you look at the Portuguese or the French or the Italian, whatever, the German, Sprechen Sie Deutsch? You know,
Yeah.
it, it's kind of it's really kind of neat. And then I became Catholic in 1997. I'm a convert, and I started doing some self studies with Greek because
Yeah.
I got involved with online apologetics with the old AOL days, the AOL chat rooms. Let me
I
tell you,
remember
that's
those
going
days.
back.
I
That's going
remember
back a
them.
quarter of a century. You know.
Yeah, I remember those days. Those are good days. I mean, when you had a lot of really good stuff that was being written, a lot of really good written stuff.
Yeah,
Now we've
those
come a
days
long
like
way, of
Carl
course.
Keating, and with that fundamental Catholicism fundamentalism
Yeah,
book, and
yeah, it was
Louis
good
Armstrong's
beginner,
book.
good beginner stuff. But you try and use that today, you're gonna get roasted beyond belief. That's good beginner. Like if you've barely converted, I would recommend that book. I definitely would.
It's been ages since I've looked at. I can't even. I mean, if you say so, I offer no comment. It's been ages.
Yeah,
I
I
can't
haven't looked
say,
at it
but
in a while. I haven't. In
I,
fact,
I
when
just I just remember all of these things, and I've got to start pulling my memories together better. But
yeah,
it's amazing, with how all of that stuff worked. And then with the Greek, and then my senior year, I had French 4, but also I also took Latin 1, and
mm,
everything just kind of continued on when I was in college with the languages.
right.
Because when you get involved in apologetics, you need to have a language background in
You have
order
to.
to be able to read the fathers and the scriptures, and
You
the
got
Latin
to.
and the Greek and the Hebrew.
You have to.
Yeah, there's no getting out of that.
No.
So by the time I started my formal theological studies, I already had French, Latin, and some self-taught Greek under me.
Yeah.
And then I
You,
took
you, you got to. You got to, because if you're going to be doing scholarly work and utilizing the databases, and you don't know anything beyond English, look, we're not telling you the people that are not involved in apologetics, that you have to know other languages, but people that are writing books that are scholarly, you've got to know another language. If you're going to be utilizing the databases like the TLG or the Patrologia Latina or Grece, you're going to have to know another language other than English. And
the
you're going to have a little bit of
patrologia,
trouble if you don't.
or the patrologia, excuse me, Greek,
Yeah, yeah,
Latino
yeah, yeah.
series,
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah,
I mean, yeah, you've got to know all that stuff, because if you
you
don't,
have to.
you're gonna get when that those John Eldridge books were really
Right?
popular,
Yeah, yeah,
Wild
yeah.
Apart and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was a comment in there about people love that quote from Saint Irenaeus. The glory of God is man fully alive. And every time I hear that, I just nails on a chalkboard, because one day I was reading Ratzinger. This was before he was Pope, before he was popular. I was reading
Right.
Ratzinger before, like 2-3 years before he was Pope and before he got popular. And he, in his book, The Spirit of the Liturgy, I had read Eldridge first, and then I was reading uh, Ratzinger a little bit later, and he actually had the full quote from Irenaeus, and I was like, "There's a whole second half of this quote." So he had the citation, and I looked it up because I was a student at the time, and I went over to the room where they had the Patrologia Graecae and Latine series,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Adversus Horacius, Book 4, Chapter 20, Verse 7." Shh. Gloria enim Dei videns homo vita autem hominis visio Dei. I'm like, son of a gun, there's a whole other quote to that nobody knows about except
Yep.
Ratzinger.
Yeah, and that really is the beauty of of going to the original text, to looking at what is said. So much, a lot of the time, is lost. Or hey, I got to be very honest. A lot of the times, when you are relying on the old Schaff English, a lot of the times they're getting biased there. Some words are very translated with a very Protestant bias. That, excuse me, it's helpful
Oh,
to go to the original. Not only that,
proof?
there is so much
I can actually
that's not
cite
in
you.
English.
I can actually cite you a really interesting example. If you
Oh, yeah?
look at the Ante-Nicene Fathers collection, Ante and Post-Nicene
Yeah,
collection,
yeah, yeah.
of the 19th century, look up chapter 6 in that collection of the Institutes by St. John Cassian.
Mm-hmm. Is it not there?
No.
Yeah, I'm not
But
shocked.
you
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
know, what chapter 6 was all about to
What was
know
that about?
why, and you have to understand Victorian English culture
Yeah.
to understand why they left that out.
Yeah, it hops from book 5 to book 7. So no, you're definitely right there. But I found a number of areas, particularly, I believe it was Nizabin hymn 27 or 28, depending on how you number it, from the great Ephraim, that you don't find either, that is very heavy on the sinlessness of Mary, very peculiar. Why that is missing from that particular translation, the very clear bias, Protestant bias. So thank the good Lord that a lot of people are translating stuff now and putting out really, really good material.
Yeah, like Ryan Grant of Mediatrix Press.
Yeah, great guy.
I'm throwing free PR to people, I guess. But
Yeah. Great guy.
I mean, I went to college with him, but yeah, I mean, Ryan does good work. Although, please do pray for him and his family. His wife tragically died of cancer recently, and they had like 7 to 9 kids, I think.
Yeah, I pray for him often. He's a great brother in the faith, and I pray for him often. And I would hope for the audience, if you don't know who he is, look up Mediatrix Press, look up Ryan Grant, and remember him and his family in your prayers, and remember the soul of his lovely wife who is departed. And we pray for her, and we truly pray for him and his family.
When you have the language background, it really does help when you're doing the theological research and such. And it came to bear with my own studies on Fatima. And I got involved in these studies because I was working on my book on Pope Leo XIII and the Prayer to Saint Michael, and I was thinking of 1 or 2 parallels to Fatima pretty strongly there.
Mm-hmm.
And we were coming up to the centenary year, 2017, 100th anniversary, and I had heard so much about the controversy surrounding the third part of The Secret that I just said, you know what? I'm just going to get to the bottom of this. What is this all about? Why are people squawking about this? So I started the research, the official research. I've had years prior to that, of looking up stuff, reading things, but now I'm kind of just focusing my attention on this. And as I was researching this question of the third part of The Secret, a lot came into focus for me. But first, let me explain. The reason why the third part of The Secret is so controversial was because it wasn't written down when the first 2 parts were written down by the end of 1941.
Mm-hmm.
Our Lady or Heaven did not want it to be revealed yet. And Lucia didn't feel as though she had that permission from heaven yet.
Right.
But then she went into a quandary because the bishop told her to write it down. But Our Lady said no. This goes back to what I said earlier about the obedience question, right? Lucia was accustomed to receiving an order from her religious superiors as if it was from God himself. So that put her into a quandary. Who do I obey? So she struggled to write it down. And then Our Lady appeared to her in early January of 1944 and gave her the permission. But she made an important distinction. We didn't know about this distinction until 2013. Our Lady had commanded Lucia, write what they command you, but not that which is given to you to understand of its meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So Lucia wrote it down on January 3rd, 1944, without so much as a thought or trouble. She put it in an envelope, sealed it. She put it in one envelope, sealed that envelope, put that envelope into a slightly bigger one, sealed that one, and put it in a larger envelope, even more. And then she put it in her notebook with her, kind of like her diary, as it were. And she gave these items to the titular bishop of Gurza, Dom Manuel, I think was his name. And in June or July, he gave all these documents to Bishop de Silva, the Bishop of Fatima, who kept the document in the chancery of archives there until 1957, when he passed it off to the Holy See in Rome. That was during the pontificate of Pius XII. Well, rumor had spread that document could be opened in 1960, because Our Lady had expressly told Sister Lucia, and the Portuguese is very, very clear, que suppose ser aberto en 1960. It can only be opened in 1960. and she specified by the Cardinal Patriarch of Lisbon or by the Bishop of Leiria, aka the Bishop of Fatima.
Mm.
Well, it didn't happen. The Bishop of Fatima didn't want to, meddle with heaven's secrets. So when an order came from Rome for copies of all of Lucia's documents in the mid-50s, he instructed send the original to Rome with the third part of the secret, unopened. Well, people begged and pleaded, but nope, De Silva was firm. The document got passed. He died 7 months later or so, in December of 1957. And the document got to Rome in April of 1957. There it stayed until John the 23rd opened it in August of 1959. So, long story short, it wasn't published in 1960 like a lot of people thought it was supposed to be. But if you remember, that's not what Our Lady said. She said, "Que supposer se aberto." Aberto means opened. It doesn't mean published.
Right. You're right.
And I have the book right here.
Very similar to the Spanish abierto, which same thing. Open, yeah.
There was a critical edition of the memoirs of Sister Lucia that was published in 2016. They were edited by Dr. Cristina Sobral of the Universidad de Coimbra. And one of the things that Sister Lucia had been asked, that was put into this collection, into this critical edition, was a series of questions by the rector of Fatima, the sanctuary of Fatima. And it's in the appendices on page 451. And Sister Lucia was asked in question 169, could you have imagined, this is a rough translation, but could you have imagined that the third part of the secret would have become destined to go to the Vatican? And then she simply said, no. But then she continued, it is one thing to authorize that it be opened and made known or revealed. It would be another to mandate it to be published, she says. And then she says, este orden now existe. And this order does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
And then she said, I understand that this is the norm of prudence and it seems good to me. So 1960 comes around, doesn't get published. All kinds of speculations take place. Fake documents come out, or claiming that they were the real thing, but they really weren't. And then in the year 2000, the Holy See decides to publish it. And when it got published, it was a vision of Christians of all walks of life, Pope, bishops, cardinals, men, women, religious, lay people, proceeding towards a cross, and they were being martyred along the way. Our Lady, there was an angel with a flaming sword shouting out, penance, penance, penance. Our Lady was there with her Immaculate Heart, and the rays coming from her were prohibiting the angel's sword from doing the harm, damage, the justice of God. It was prohibited. It was holding back the justice of God, in other words. Mm-hmm. Well, people saw this and they were like, that's it. This is what you withheld all these years. This is so innocuous, But it wasn't. It wasn't innocuous. And I can't stand it when I hear people talk about it that way, because I'm like,
right.
No, it's not. That's not innocuous. First of all, you're basically showing a prophecy that people were going to get killed. And one of the most prominent figures in that is the Pope. For a Pope to publish that, he's essentially putting a target on his back.
Yeah.
And you've been around, you and I are about the same age. You and I probably both know equally well, if you probably know me even better than I do. You have crazy people out there that would have sat there and said, God told me I was to fulfill the third secret of Fatima, and we take a plug at the Pope.
Yep.
So no Pope in his right mind is going to sit there and put that kind of a bullseye on his back. Not to mention that there was no interpretation. Our Lady said in 1944, write what they command you, but not that which is given to you to understand of its meaning. So the meaning wasn't going to be given to us.
Right.
That was clear as of January of 1944. So by the time the document gets to Rome, there's no interpretation. I mean, Pope John the 23rd's personal secretary, later Cardinal, then Monsignor Capavilla, sat there and he basically says to people, "Yeah, we're all kind of sitting and scratching our head. We didn't know what this was all. It could have been supernatural, couldn't have been. We don't know." Yep. So they decided to sit on it, and that's why it wasn't published. And by the time the text was published, a body of literature had been formed on this subject that people interpreted the document through, but they weren't questioning that body of literature. And these are the things that I was discovering when I was researching for my book on the third part of The Secret of Fatima. This is the first edition here. As you can see, it's kind of a giant beast, but
oh yeah.
The second edition chopped off 200 pages, so much tighter, I might add. But I still managed to get 4 new chapters.
Incredible.
Oh yes, and some people better be very afraid. Chapter 7 is going to really do a lot of damage to some of these conspiracy theorists.
And there are a lot of them out there.
There are. It's about fitting a narrative. That's what this is all about.
Right.
It's about enlarging the conspiracy in order to fit, or in some cases, save the narrative.
Yeah.
And that narrative is Vatican II bad. Anybody who backs it up, evil.
Yeah.
That is the essential. This really isn't about Fatima. This is about Vatican II.
Yeah.
And people's hatred of
their borderline, or maybe not even borderline, but outright rejection of Vatican II.
Yes.
is at an all-time high. It truly is, and it really, really is very disappointing.
Yes. Now, I believe we can offer constructive criticisms of Vatican II. There are things we can criticize.
Sure.
But there's a way to do it and a way not to do it. And I disagree to pit Fatima against Vatican II.
Yep.
As at least in this way. So one of my criticisms is I don't think that the council was very wise to leave out a condemnation of communism. I understand why the Holy Father wanted it. He had that arrangement so that they could have the 2 Russian Orthodox observers.
Right.
I get it. I understand. But I personally don't think that was a wise administrative decision. There were a lot of Christians that were suffering under communism, and the council would have been the best place to address all of that and to give people hope. But that's not what we got. And I know Matthew Hoffman, a few years back, he translated some of those drafts that the council fathers had on communism. That did right. They got lost on the cutting room floor, so to speak. But he actually did a translation of them and published them. I think LifeSite News, I think it was, published it, or Crisis Magazine, I don't remember. Somebody published it and had an article about it. And it was a beautiful text. And so there are things we can critique legitimately and say, well, but remember, in hindsight, which is what we have here, nearly a quarter into the 21st century, we possess that. 60, 70 years ago, they didn't have that.
Right.
So it's easy for us to sit and judge, but, so at any rate, the long and short of it is, I decided to do all of this research, and in order to get to the bottom of it, I couldn't do everything because it was just so vast. And I had a time constraint. I am one man. There's so much, and so there were some topics that I just couldn't get to. But the second edition does. So, and again, not every topic, but some of the ones that I couldn't get to that were more of an interest to people back then, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I wasn't able to do, but now I was. So, for instance,
Do you have a working title for your new book?
oh, it's the same one.
Okay,
I'm still
gotcha.
part of the Secret of Fatima. This is
Wonderful.
the advanced reader's copy that I was able to print up.
Awesome.
There's with the advent of AI generated stuff,
Yeah.
there's a thread on Reddit called Regeneration of the Saints,
Oh,
and
wow.
there's a priest and I believe is a layman that they use the AI program Midjourney through I think Discord,
Right.
and they come up with some very impressive images. And I found it quite by accident one day, and the image on the front cover is taken from one of those AI things that they had done.
Right.
I don't know if it's going to be the final one or not, but as of right now, it's looking pretty good. And it's going to
Yeah,
be.
yeah.
Um,
It's awesome.
there's a bibliography in the back, um, and I decided to do something novel. You know how in footnotes people have URL addresses?
Oh, yeah.
You I hate that. I hate it because I do a lot of formatting work myself
Right.
for my own projects and other stuff, and you just can't seem to just get the URL addresses just right.
Right.
So I said, you know what? Let me try a novel approach. I have a bibliography anyway, and the URL addresses in the print edition have to be all spelled out. So why don't I just take them out of the footnotes and leave them for the bibliography, but then just tell everybody in the introduction to the book that this is, if you want the specific URL address, you'll have to go to the bib at the back. And that's partly how I was able to save so much space. Because another thing was um, there's one organization that has published a lot of information on Fatima, but their website has been inconsistent over the years. It's constantly changing, being updated, new things, all that stuff.
Right.
And the old website is website as it was when I was working on the first edition is no longer, and some of those old articles are gone. So I had to go to the Internet Archive Wayback Machine in order to pull those out of the eBay.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, that's just gonna add a whole other half to
Yeah.
URL addresses, making the book infinitely longer. So I said,
Right.
you know what, this isn't worth it. This is just not worth it. Um, so I figured, you know what, I'm just putting it in the bid at the back.
Yeah.
You have to, because if you don't, you're gonna go nuts.
No, you will. You will. You'll lose your mind. You will.
Yeah. So it's when the book gets published, hopefully we can, if you're up for it, maybe we can do another interview and we can talk more about
Oh
it.
no,
Or
there is no doubt that when your book comes out, we will definitely I'm definitely gonna have to bring you on again, without a doubt, because I know that by the time this airs, which will of course be this weekend, once I get done editing, put an intro and what have you, and attach some nice artwork to it, people are gonna love it. People love digging into Fatima, and indeed, I know we're right around the 1 hour mark, but before we wrap up, I want to ask you if you can put in a plug for where do you want to direct people to? Like, you have a web page, Amazon, anywhere where if people say, where can I find any book or any material of Kevin's? How can I find it? Where would you direct people, brother?
I have my website. It's www.kevinsimmons.com, KevinSymonds.com. There you can find more about. It has like a blog part as well, but also like an about me page, a contact page.
Did I write that right? Or
Page.
Did I put that right there?
Yep, that's it.
Okay, wonderful,
That's
wonderful.
it. That's the
And
word.
by the time the show airs, there'll be a link down below. People will be able to click it so they can go ahead and they can go to your webpage. Okay, yeah, continue, brother. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No, it's okay. So on there's little tabs towards the top of the website that tell you, where direct you, like my about me contact page, but also my books as well. There's also a list of all the interviews that I've done. I think up to February or March of this year. I think it was. I have to update it again, but people can click on things and just kind of get a sense for my activities, what I've done, where I've been, all that kind of good stuff. The book links will take you to Amazon, to
Okay.
books, but I definitely prefer people to go to the publishers themselves. Um,
Yeah.
like the book on the prayer to Saint Michael, Pope Leo XIII really have a vision,
Brother, any final closing thoughts, any final closing words before we wrap up? The floor is yours right now, brother.
I would ask if people would just keep in their prayers. A gentleman I know, his name is Adam. He's experiencing it's possibly a torn retina, I think in his eye, left eye, I want to say. Um, so if you guys wouldn't mind just praying for him, I'd really appreciate it. It's he's very concerned about it.
That's definitely something that we've got to consider doing, to pray for others that are in need of prayer. And everybody, please remember him in your prayers. If you go to Eucharistic adoration, which I know a lot of people do, remember him in your prayers. And I'll definitely be praying for him as well. Brother, I had a great time dialoguing with you, and really excited to have you back on again. And I guarantee you, when your book drops, and maybe even before, depending on how the audience likes the show, any questions they may have, I'll bring you on again, brother. I greatly appreciate your time.
Oh yeah, I'd love to be back. And if you want an advanced reader's copy so you can get ahead of the game for
I do.
when you do an interview, I can send you a PDF.
I sure do. I want people to be extremely jealous. Now I'm joking around, but yeah, I do, and that's perfect. I want to get into digging into that, reading it, and I'll be all ready for when we do another show. Brother, thank you so much for your time, and God bless you, brother.
Thank you. Yeah, just real quick, it's one of the nice features of the second edition is it has pictures now.
Oh,
pictures.
Awesome. Yeah.
Even better. Everybody loves pictures.
Oh, I love them too. I'm a nerd that way. I love a book that's full of great theological information, and if you toss a picture or two in there, hey, that's extra icing on the cake. I love that.
Yeah, I pulled some of them out of my personal archives, like people that I've met in Fatima, for instance, some notable people. I try to be humble like that, but I'm like, you know what? It really works very well here, so I'm just going to put it in there.
You got to take advantage of that. You have to. Brother, thank you so much for your time, brother. We'll be talking again soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you for having me on.